Hi, hello. It is Mark Delacruz, your basically product lead for LoreLink, here to talk yet again about LoreLink and many different uses you could have for it in your campaigns. We're starting off again. Let me switch my view. There I am. Oop, hello. Oop, there we go. Camera's slightly off, it feels like. I feel like I'm off. But okay, in any case. So, we are here today basically talking about we're going to look into a 5th ed conversion that I discovered while at Origins called Redsky. It's this big book here. Basically, while we were at, I'm not leaning yet, so just casually hanging out in the corner of the thing. But Red Sky is a 5th E. I used the phrase. I remember I used the word. It is because they used the word total conversion, which just makes me think that these people were probably Doom players back in the day, or old enough to be part of that industry because of the fact that that basically Doom, all the Doom mods that were called total conversions back in the day. But in any case. We met basically at Origins because their booth was directly across the aisle from us. And so I spent a lot of time while I wasn't talking to awesome people who stopped by our booth staring at this cool graphic here. And so by the end of the convention, I had to come over and take a look and find out what they were about. And there I met the lead designer, Kenneth Manley. I'm going to mispronounce his name and I feel terrible. Manili, probably. Kenneth Manili Jr. Yeah, this guy purchased the book there. He signed it for me very nicely. And I have taken it back and I've taken a look at it. I've gone through it. I love picking up new books and flipping through them for 2 reasons. One, even if I never run this game, which sadly happens, I have more TTRPGs on my shelf than I know why I'm looking washed out. I don't have any of my lights on. But I have more TTRPGs on my shelf than I do ever going to probably play with, even with being a professional GM as a career, as it were. You only get so much time. I'm going to wander around the room making my voice come in and out because I'm thinking I'm wearing a headset, but my microphone's on the desk. In any case, I'm back. Oh, and look, I'm better lit. And our text is coming in like really light. Hi, Streamlabs. What did you do that for? But in any case, but I love to basically go through and basically read these books because if nothing else, even if I never get to play it, basically there's a wealth of cool ideas and mechanics and things like that that you might pick up from one of these things that you might be like, hey, I want to take that. And I want to put that into my game. So, and you should never feel guilty about it. I know in school we talk about when you're in school, they talk a lot about the fact that you really shouldn't plagiarize and steal stuff. And if you're writing a campaign, if you're writing an adventure, you should be probably a little bit careful about it. You should cite your sources, as it were. But if you're running a game and you want to throw clocks in from, let's say, Blades in the Dark, you could just do that. No one can stop you. It's a really cool idea. It's a great way of adding stuff in. Hey, Wolfmom, see you there. But, so it's always great to read through a new book, basically read through a campaign and be like, oh, I really like the way they did this or that. The interesting things that Red Sky does. One of the first things that basically, it's their standout kind of thing that they love to talk about. It's kind of basically one of their key features. It's literally in the first pages of the book. They replace attributes instead with elements. And kind of similar to what Pendragon does in terms of you have opposing stats, which you can only be one. Basically, Pendragon has it as a continuum. The more you are in one, the less you are in another. This just has you were either on or off. You're either basically each pair is opposed and you pick one of them. You're either a fire or you're a water. You're either an air or you're an earth. You're either a void or you're an aether. Or ether, depending on how you like to pronounce it. They don't have a pronunciation guide for that one. Oh, there is one in the back. I should look it up to see if they actually gave a pronunciation for how they pronounce ether. They did not list it in the back. Oh well. But cool thing that this book does do, their appendix in the back, their index in the back, is all terms, and it's got other things in world terms, and does give basically pronunciation, which is great when you have a bunch of really cool names that are thrown at you. It is always good to have a pronunciation guide somewhere that you could stop and go, I see how you type that, but I don't know what culture you're pulling that spelling from. So, the big things that they like to stress is that they basically, so I talked about the element system, and each of those elements has their own things, and you're one or the other. And so when you go through character creations and you select them, you're not only helping build your character and their background, you're also kind of defining some traits about them. Like fire, as you might expect, fire types are a little bit more basically they're more go get them, more of the spur of the moment. Waters are more cautious, think it over type thinkers. Basically, same with air and earth. You've got somewhat things. Air is chaotic, earth is more solid. And then basically void and ether. Void is more personal, and aether is more cultural. Basically, aka they want to help the civilization, the group. So all of basically all of those are really, really neat kind of way of setting up your characters. And I do like the fact that you set up your character with these abilities and things like that right from the start. But they know the fact that you're like, hey, your character is going to go through changes over time. So they don't state the fact that once you've made these choices, you're done. Close the book. You're not going anywhere. They're like, no, hey, basically your character can change over time. And here are the rules for what happens when your character changes elements, as it were. They switched from basically they were impetuous in their youth, and so they were fire, and now they've grown more to over the course of this adventure. They've realized that maybe they need to be less impulsive, and so they've slowly shifted to water. And so there are rules for how that gets handled in here. So basically does a decent job. Basically, it's kind of an alignment system. It's kind of a background system. It's kind of a personality. It has like virtues and vices associated with it. But it does not lock you in as much as any of those usually do. Not to say basically that says not everything changes when you switch between fire and water, for example. They have rules. Basically, some things change, some things don't. But I'm not going to go into that much detail on the system in here. The setting is probably more what I'm going to focus on. Basically, like the system itself is interesting. It is a 5e conversion. You can tell the fact that the people who played it used to play some 3.5, basically 3.5 or Pathfinder, and enjoyed it because some things make a return. Like the biggest thing, of course, is Touch AC shows back up in here, which Touch AC is definitely one of those things that basically was in Pathfinder and was in 3.5 D&D. And then got removed because it was a little bit complicated to have basically to keep track of, much like having 2 armor classes in Starfinder, like we talked about a couple weeks ago. Kind of muddies the water a little bit and makes things a little bit crunchier and more mathematical. Touch AC was that same thing and had a bunch of weird corner and edge cases because you always were dealing with the fact that, okay, your AC isn't always your AC. What if something... But if something could affect you and affect not your AC, but could affect your touch AC, basically could affect just your AC, could affect just your touch AC, it got a little complicated. So, but basically, it makes sense from a world building. Basically, it makes sense a lot of times because you're like, just because something can hit you and it's calculating your armor, doesn't mean that something that can just touch you should be just as challenging to do. I understand. Um, it's basically, it is a very much a low magic system. Basically, the things they like to talk about being the big differences in their system introduced at the beginning. Um, Limited healing. The healing in the system, basically, there isn't a cleric class. There isn't really a divinity or magic in this game. Everything is low magic. It's science fantasy. A lot of your things you would usually be handled by magic in basically in a D&D or a Pathfinder are handled instead by basically a sufficiently advanced ancient technology that resembles magic in some ways, but is purely technological. There's combat, there's social interaction, there's exploration and things like that. They like to stress the fact that it's not just a combat system. The classes are basically the classes aren't balanced in terms of basically in terms of combat power. Two of their classes are pure, basically are a lot more purely, uh, basically not mechanical, but basically are more purely combat based. And two of the classes are more two of the classes are more social based. The wordsmith and the sage are two of their classes which are very definitely um, basically they're the talky types. They're the exploration types. They're the dealing with weird stuff types. Um, and basically some of the other classes, your fighter, your emissary, which is a kind of a champion paladin type. Um, all of those are more combat heavy. And so if you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to play this class, you're not going to keep up with someone who's playing a more combat heavy class. Um, and the basically, so as a GM, you need to be aware of that. You need to realize that if someone picks a less combat effective class, you need to be prepared to either basically make sure that each type of system gets its time in the spotlight. So your social encounters have basically get to shine and show off their powers, and then they'll take a back seat while the combat people will get their chance to show off their stuff, and then they'll go back to the back seat as social comes back, and you'll interact like that. Or you need to allow some crossover between them. Maybe basically you need the social person to be able to have an effect in combat that maybe isn't exactly dictated by the game, but makes sense from a world building standpoint. Like, oh, hey, the social person has a better understanding of things. Basically, maybe they can influence encounters, change things, shift things, distract things in combat. Basically, with their abilities, and maybe the combat people will be able to use those combat abilities that basically to help the social person get what they need. And you need to be willing to be open to that and basically be able to balance that. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a set of players who are going to be very unhappy. Because you basically, if you're running an all combat adventure and you didn't tell the players that, and the player playing the sage is like, when do I get to do my research and all the other stuff that I've got, and you're like, well, yeah, it doesn't work as well. So, but the big thing about basically Redsky basically is as much mechanics, because like you've got your introduction to the mechanics here at the front of the book, which is this, and you have a little bit more towards the back of the book, which is basically some of it is at new mechanics, some of it is mechanics that it's converting over from D&D 5th Ed. But then you have this middle section of the book right about here. Close enough. And all of that is your world building and story creation, basically your world building and setting. And that's where this series really kind of basically this Colo conversion really shines. It is a basically it's its own setting. Basically, it takes place in something called a world ship, which is basically they explain right from the start. The world ship is a basically a highly advanced, basically civilization's kind of arc, as it were. It's a giant spaceship that basically is the size of a planet, essentially, or at least basically has enough space to be a viable habitat for numerous civilizations. And that it's been set up and set out amongst the stars for some reason. They don't go into that. They kind of leave that up to you if you really want to deal with it. And they tell you, and so basically you have a group of overseers who are super powerful humans. Maybe not. Basically, they're it's one of those. They're so far advanced, it's hard to link those together. But they are basically this. Basically, they've created this planet. Basically, everything that happens inside this land happens because they've decided to make it happen. The sun shines because they programmed the sun. Water flows because they built it that way. And so they've created this giant land, basically this land, and the purpose of it is that basically they seem to be basically kind of wanting to basically kind of do some breeding, basically trying to figure not breeding. They're trying to figure out. They're trying to do some. I'm trying to get the right word. Evolution. Basically, essentially, they're pitting these civilizations, trying to find the best fits for whatever purpose they want. Things reach a peak, they pick a civilization, they pull that civilization out, and then they start the tests all over again. And so, basically, this takes place during one of those civilization tests. And so, basically, they do go through, and so basically they're like, okay, that's the basis for this setting. Basically, you've got a low-tech world that has a bunch of weird artifacts in it that is basically it's very deliberately designed to be combative. Things are living in a relatively close space together, big enough that they can develop up on their own, but once they reach a certain point, they kind of have to interact with each other, and those interactions are going to be over resources and competitions and things like that. There's this weird kind of elder technology that they've scattered all over the place that can basically is another limited resource that they're going to fight over. And figure out who gets the edge. So, and as they say, you can either include that and use that, or you could just say, hey, you know what? I just like the idea of these cultural groups working together. I like the setting. I don't need to mess with these weird observers looking at stuff. And basically, like, your adventures don't have to deal with that. Some of their adventures, like the one we'll be looking at later, may kind of tick into that. They may poke into that basically because of some of the stuff, and you may want to edge into that as part of your adventure or not. But it just kind of provides the basis. But the really fascinating thing is basically that setup I gave you of basically the overseers have set up this planet so that they can pick basically at the end of a certain time period, they will have decided that one of the civilizations on the planet is better suited than the rest. So they literally basically say, okay, we have basically you've got multiple eras going on in this world. It starts off in a time period known as the heroic era, then there's the uprising era, then there's the Exodus era, and then there's the Red Sky era. And that is the course of this civilization. They traced it all out on a timeline. They're like basically you've got basically an era of myths and legends and powerful basically kind of iron. You're a little bit closer to Iron Age than you are to basically Renaissance time period. Then you have uprisings where basically all of those things come to a head. Kingdoms start to get founded. Basically civil wars kind of create basically powers start to kind of settle down. Exodus era is suddenly basically the overseers start to put pressure on the civilization, and basically they start to basically shorten basically they start to reduce resources. I can't believe basically climate starts to change. Basically, certain areas become unsuited, so the races kind of start getting forced together, and eventually it all ends in what is known as the Red Sky, name of the book, Red Sky period, where everything basically, essentially apocalypse kind of starts to happen. The sky turns red, and everyone kind of basically like numerous terrible events start to happen in all of these various areas. basically forcing all of the civilizations to come to basically essentially a climactic head that only one or more, basically the civilization taking a page out of Tay-Tay's book, with its Redsky era. I am not as familiar with Tay-Tay. You'll have to remind me of who that is. Taylor, oh gosh. Right. Sorry. Over my head. Yes, I understand her eras too. It's the thing, as soon as you explained it was Taylor Swift, I went, right, eras, check. Yes, I'm Gen X, Zennial. I'm closer to Zennial than Gen X. The Oregon Trail generation, whatever you want to call it. But in any case, like, I'm familiar with it. It just isn't the first thing that jumps into my mind while I'm basically in the middle of a bunch of D&D stuff. But yes, you are basically, I appreciate that. In any case, but basically the neat thing is, and so they set all of that up in this book. Like, you know exactly that basically this book says this is how the world starts, this is how this world ends. Here are the civilizations that take place in this, basically that are in this version of the test. You have your archivist, you have feather folk, you have humans, you have night riders, you have spore spawn, you have wake walkers. And they're like, here's all the locations and things like that they've set up. And here's how things happen. Basically, here's at the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end. Which is neat because it gives, basically, I really enjoy that because of the fact that it gives you a really solid look at the world and lets you go, basically lets you kind of play whatever kind of, basically gives you a lot more freedom to play what you want to kind of play. If you pick this up saying, I really like this world, but I really prefer a more heroic bent on it. That, yeah, you're probably playing during the early heroic era where there's mythical monsters and basically legendary tales and basically things like that. You're definitely more basically either Arthurian legend or basically Greek and basically Greek or Roman mythology, basically that kind of era of basically larger than life basically adventurers, heroes standing up again, basically exploring the unknown, not knowing what is over that hill, and then going over that hill and dealing with it whenever it shows up. And so you can start it there. But if you're like, oh, I want to do a little bit more grounded, a little bit more basically established kingdoms and things like that, then maybe you're doing the Uprising era. If you're like, oh, I want basically the idea of a world at basically a kind of a medieval world at war type situation it's more interesting to me. I want to deal with political tensions and things like that where everyone is not quite at each other's throats, but basically is close, where things are pushing against each other, and players need to deal with the fact that basically this culture will basically may consider these cultures the bad guys. And so there's a lot of tensions and things like that. And decisions they make could will have consequences, and we'll kind of look at that here in a bit with the Shieldwoods adventure that we're going to talk about. And lastly, if you're like, I want to play a post-apocalyptic game, then the last era, basically the Redsky era, is there for you if you want to basically throw your characters up against kind of more somewhat Call of Cthulhu-esque, more impossible odds, more basically like, hey, basically the world is coming to an end. How will your heroes deal with it? Who can they save? What will they fight for? What lines get drawn, etc., etc. Then this book has it as well. So basically, if you go in and you find the mechanics great, the settings are basically give you that wide range to deal with. Now they do say, like, basically if you're really worried about canon, you're like, oh no, I can't do this because it says that this side always wins, and so I can't mess with that at all. They're like, hey, by the way, the overseers run simulations to see what could have happened differently. Those simulations change stuff. Cool. Do what you want. It's canon. It's just like, basically, they're like, basically, who's to say which one's the real thing and which one's a simulation? do what you want. Well, basically everything could be canon. So basically, but it's a so for basically in each of the cultures and things like that they have in here has a lot of good world building and other stuff around it. Um, so you can have this, you have a lot of different places. And in the book, when they're talking about an area, because you're like, okay, I'm looking into this particular, I want to look at basically the hive halls, basically, which are kind of this insectile swarm life, or the feather folk, who are basically more an avian humanoid. Basically, are the archivists and their city states. They'll talk about, hey, here's what was going on in this section of the world during the heroic age. Here's what's happening in this world basically during the red sky. And then they'll generally talk about what this area looks like. And then at the end, they'll be like, okay, here's some cool ideas for what your players could do if you set something in here. Like this is just one thing I'm looking at. Your Ethereum characters could change the fates of millions, discover it as paradigm changing as the Archon might lay in a frozen tomb your missionary is delving. Will you track down and return a stolen Sarzam before the forgotten knowledge it contains start a war? The Ethereum population is well known in every corner of Deva, so trust in your principles and faith as you embrace the challenges of the million-step path. And so basically a lot of these will basically we'll talk about basically like, oh, hey, here's a quick 1-sentence or 2-sentence kind of idea that can give you a start on your campaign of it. You're like, oh, hey, cool. I want to run this. I really basically, that sounds like a cool idea. They're not giving you a bunch of details. It's not an entire adventure. They have those, but it gives you that couple of sentences to start things off, to get the juices flowing, to be able to work from, to basically to be able to write down an adventure, basically to start in something like Lorelink. Which, now that I've talked a lot about the world, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Lorelink. So basically, all of those, those all of this is great because you can come into Lorelink and you can be like, cool, I've got all of this. I've got a bunch of information that basically I want. I might basically, maybe I'll start with locations that I've pulled out of the book, and I'm going to basically create the world of Red Sky. And I'm going to pull the map. Basically, I'll pull the map, basically pull in the map. Basically, do I have a copy of the world map in here? Let me check. Boop, 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 boop. Some stuff I have, some stuff I don't. I didn't pull, basically, I have the physical copy of the book, and a digital copy of the first adventure, which means I don't necessarily have all of the assets I would normally want digital. Okay, I don't have the map. But basically, you could start with Red Sky and include anything. You basically, all that stuff I talked about. If you wanted to make note of that, you could put that into child notes, so you're always reminded of, hey, here's how the world works. Here's how things work and things like that in this. Basically, in this universe, I want to record that. So I could use that, and I could have that as my base, and then I could break down into one of those sections that I liked, that seemed interesting to me, and pull it out. For example, basically just because, basically for time periods, I love grabbing a pre-made adventure because they're a great way of basically being able to basically pull out what the creators of the world really think is important, what they basically, how they feel their game should run, how they feel their game should flow. So I'm pulling up, basically to show you really quickly, I am pulling from this adventure available for sale on the Red Sky site. Basically it's their first module. It's basically Into the Shield Woods. And it's a really interesting adventure. Basically the quick summary of it, I have that under campaign here. Basically, the Solar Genevieve and basically an Aegis is on the brink of war, and it's up to you to determine the source of the mysterious supply threats before blood is shed. So this obviously takes place during that, basically I believe it's probably the Exodus era. I don't know if they actually give an era. They do not give an era, basically, per se. I'm going to guess it's during the Exodus era because that's the era where things are really basically it's either Exodus or late Uprising, where You've got the human empire, which is doing that thing human empires do, which is expand to fill all available space. And so on the outskirts, you have these other races who are kind of starting to push back. And so this adventure takes place right there on the border of that, in an area known as Snow's Edge. And so we create that area. We'll quickly upload that image here. Snow's Edge map. We'll dump that into Redsky. We'll call it a map. So that's the player version of it, because that's what we're going to upload. If I wasn't doing this on the stream, I would take more time to actually fill out that description, because that's important for discussing, basically making sure that making sure your images are accessible. Though I may just do it anyway because, hey, it is important. There we go, Snow's Edge player map. Oops, that's keywords. I'm in the wrong place. There we go. Broad road up to a range with only one visible pass. I need to actually preview this. How do we get to it? There we go. Boop. Oh, I just clicked off. As a slight problem that we're looking to address in Lorelink. Our closing the windows could be a little bit sensitive. Leads to a pass in a mountain range. I can't reverse those words. We just lime, woods around the path. The path of gold. Field woods. Broad it, we'll call it included that. To the path is a clone of yep. Grab that image again. Drop it in. Grimmerly is unhappy with me. It's fine. Images uploading. Please wait. It's briefly like, why are you trying to upload an image in the middle of the stream? But yep. So I could insert that. And I could pull the description for what Redsky, basically for what we talked basically about Snow's Edge, which is they have dramatic personality, which is great. They have a great entire section right at the beginning talking about locations and things like that. So there's that, and I need to pull this really quickly. Oop. Okay. That's not what I wanted. We'll work with it. Hello? Oh, you're just deciding to be a pain. Okay, cool. Chrome is fighting me. It's fine. Technology. Not even once. So we will drop that description in. dump that into the read aloud. This is description stuff. Mm-hmm. Doop-a-doo. And do that. Okay. Cool. Let's save that. So now we've got that snow's edge. Oh, and basically we should also make that our map as well. Because, save that change. By making that our map, oh, that map is way too big. But we can work with it for now. But basically you can see we've got all this, basically all this data on this. Let me shrink that. I knew I should have resized some of these things. Oh well. But in any case, basically now when I have the map, basically see if I can shrunk it down. I can use the hot spotting. I can quickly create areas of interest on it. I can go, let's create the city of Paris. We'll add more information to them later. We can add the shield woods. We're going to talk about those in particular. Talk about the Titan's Artery. And we can talk about Aegean defensive, that one. There's also the Core's Mouth, which is also there. So basically I'm just quickly creating these locations because once I've created them, I can just come up here and be like, oh, that's the Aegean defensive line. That's Parif. That's the Titan's Artery. Like the shield woods themselves are just kind of there. And a lot of these other areas we could also create labels for and things like that for events and things like that as they happen. So we can build out this world. Basically, we've got this, basically, again, the world building is the strong part here. So we can start with the locations and start to build those out and be able to link them together, put them on a map and get an idea of where things are, where factions are, things like that. We can also basically look at this from a more, basically, like, that's a big map. Basically, the nice thing about this system, and there's a reason why they have a big map and things like that, is that the system does have really solid rules for exploration. And you can see that kind of come out in this adventure when you start to plan it out, because it does a lot of, here you are, here's your location, here's kind of a big, basically, you start off in this town, and you're told something is going on that's affecting this town, but it's whatever it's happening is coming from outside the town, so you need to go out of the town and go into the woods, or basically maybe up the mountain valley, basically up the kind of that hill valley towards the mountains, and basically and explore there. And they have a lot of solid rules on exploration about how you can track things, how do you track things with landmarks, how you can explore and not get lost. So all of those rules are in there, and you can tell, okay, yeah, they really want you to use those rules. They really like the idea of the fact that, hey, we're going to tell you that something is out in the woods, and we want you to push your players to go out into the woods and actually go exploring to make use of those, exploration rules that we've written. The other way, basically, if you're like, I want to write more of a, you could take that. You can also see, like, hey, what I really like about this is I really like the core drama that's at the center of this, because this does, basically, their adventure that they give you has a really interesting kind of a core, basically, because again, they've got all that world building. You've got this core established kind of world that basically you can use for dramatic purposes. So you've got the solar hegemony, which is the big human expansionistic empire. Basically, you can name your big empire throughout through basically our human history, and you can probably come up with a decent equivalent to it somewhere in here. Is it basically is it Roman basically is it the Roman Empire? Is it the Persian Empire under Alexander the Great? Is it the American dream and basically westward expansion? And all of that, all of those, basically you can pull from all of those, and basically obviously which one you pull on and how you pull on it is going to kind of cast your basically this empire in a slightly different light. Is this basically, are they more pioneering, or is it more, hey, we know you live here, we don't care, we're kicking you out because we've decided we need more land and you happen to have land. And so they put basically that, again, this uprising era, this Exodus era pushes all of these together and basically forces them to kind of start to butt up, and basically it's on the edges of these things that the interesting conflicts are going to arise. So you're going basically you're like, oh, I want to deal with basically kind of an interesting setup. So you're going to basically set up this the meeting with the general. And so it's going to be basically essentially, this is part of chapter 2. General, I need to pull his name. Luckily, they have a nice dramatis personae. Basically, dramatic. I'm always terrible at that. Dramatis personae. Personae. Persona. Persona? Probably dramatis personae. The general. Thanks. I copied the wrong thing. That's great. Let's try that again. This time copying the right things. Work with me here. Work with me here, Adobe. There we go. Jonas. Ask them. Persona non grata. Persona. Yeah, basically it's that spelling. Basically, my brain is blanking on the correct Latin pronunciation. It's not persona non persona. Persona en gratin? Yes, with cheese. Au gratin. Basically, a neutral type third party to supplies. Very important. They Persona Royale with cheese? Yes. Of course, that's what it is. It's the French version, obviously. So we create that event. So now we've got, go in there. Oops. Hey, come back here. Basically, we've got the general in here. So we're like, okay, let's go ahead and quickly make sure we capture anything we want about, basically want to capture about that general. So we'll go ahead and capture. Never rely on Twitch chat to help you with anything. They are not here to help. Your moderators are here to help. Twitch chat? I don't think Twitch chat is here to help. We appreciate Twitch chat very much. Basically, we appreciate Twitch chat so much that we'd love for you to follow us and be able to come back later and show back up whenever we're basically, whatever we are, basically, whenever we're streaming. And you can use the follow button to know whenever we're streaming again. And Paul and Tony are also my moderators. Yes, that is true. But, you know. Let's go ahead and honest. Nice thing, the very nice thing. One of the things I like about this adventure is not only do they provide you with the basically not only do they provide you with the basically with the characters, they also provided you with tokens for everything. So if you're wanting to use it, you should be able to. I was hoping as a... Did they include a... I was hoping they would have a token for the general, but it appears that I was incorrect. That's the Aegean commander. So I'm just going to pick a likely looking human. Congrats, sir. Maybe that's a little bit too villainous. Let's pick a different character. There we go. Okay, there we go. Maybe a little young, but we'll deal with it. We will actually include that now that we've selected them. Perfect. Ooh, that interacted interestingly with the hex. So basically you're going to create all of the create these basically as you're going through. You're like, okay, I need to create that so that I can keep track of basically my character interactions with them, because in a basically the way that this module works is what I have here on the screen is that it is you get told in, you're like, hey, General shows up and says our supplies in this town are being sabotaged. And while I would love to be able to just be able to say clearly it's this or this, I fear that I need to be able to back up any statement I make as being the truth. Like, I'd rather not start a war with the nearby country that we just happen to be very close to and kind of butting up against over something that someone else is doing without good proof. I'm not going to basically, this escalates to a war. I care about my troops. I don't want them to die in some meaningless squabble because someone wanted to start a war or something like that. Basically, just to make sure everything's on the up and up, we're asking you to go, basically you as a neutral third party, group of mercenaries, sell swords, basically townsfolk, however your characters want to, and have you interact with basically gives you a reason for these characters to basically investigate it, that then they're outside the chain of command, as it were. And so if I'm setting this up, I'm going to want to be able to keep solid notes on who the players are interacting with, what they any pieces of items and evidence, like for example, orders. Sabotage. Evidence. Orders for Aegean troops to legitimate supplies were identifiable as a forgery on a... I know there's a check in here. One second. this BC 14 intelligence station. Cool. So basically now, I'm going to want to create the evidence and let's basically list them in here. Basically these are the things which are evidence for this. Basically that refers to this, like. Corpse. This is nothing. Evidence. Corpse. Forest. Probably. So basically, I can create all basically. I can keep track of all these pieces of evidence and things like that, so that I can basically keep track of basically what my players have collected and what they haven't. I'm going to be able to assign that. I'm going to be able to use that in sessions. Basically, when I create a session, basically if I have a whenever basically like investigation session. I'm just going to quickly create that. So the player investigation, I'm going to be able to include those pieces of evidence that they've collected, basically as they collect them over the course of the adventure. I can keep those listed here, so that I can keep track of exactly what is happening. Basically, what evidence they're collecting, what evidence that they're focusing on, and basically, if I'm using player sharing, which is another feature, I can share the session with them, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we collected this, we collected that. Basically, here are the things that we have. Here are the things that we need to keep building off of." Basically, over the course of the adventure, yeah. But basically, to build all that up, because basically, if I'm building out a tight kind of investigation sort of adventure, basically keeping track of events and things like that, basically events which give away clues, which give clues and things like that, I'm going to want to create different events for them. Like if they have a conversation with a particular, what's the name of that one? Our music has taken an interesting tour. Where is that? Oh, there it is. Ugh. I have to pull this name out because it is non-standard name. Rakot Pull. And preservationist. Okay. And so I wanted to name that something different. I wanted to name that Paul. So basically, this might be the confession of this is the event, not the character. Oop. So I want to create that separately. So if I want to create that really quickly, boom, create. Now I can put it right here. Quickly create that. And then basically then I can have the switch this to session, and then I could go into more description over what they say during that. I've got notes down here that I could use to keep track of basically what the player's interactions with them is. For example, if they basically, that the players swore an oath. But to not reveal the location of the preserve to any outsiders. Basically, I can keep that secret. Basically, and so that I can have that information there. So now I'm keeping track. Basically, now I can keep track of, because again, how your mystery or investigation builds out is going to build out a lot on you keeping track of everything that's happening, what the players have seen, what the players have interacted with, because you really don't want to get cut out in the middle of, basically, you can't remember if they've done that or not, so you improvise something, and then halfway through the session, one of the players happens to look back through their notes, and be like, hey, I've got a note here saying that they told us this, or we learned this out, and that contradicts what you kind of improvised. And now you have to backtrack and deal with it, and you're getting, basically, your players are getting kind of pulled out of the adventure, pulled out of basically this kind of the tightness of this. So keeping good notes, keeping track of all of your dramatis personae, basically to make sure you know who all your players are, who all your actors are, who all your suspects are, is going to be key, because basically, especially for this adventure really wants you to basically build up all of this, because what it comes down to in the final scene is your players have the evidence, or basically however much evidence they gather, and hopefully as a GM you've I said it correctly. Basically, hopefully as a GM you've kind of gathered them, so they've gotten a decent chunk of information, or at least given them opportunities to gather the correct information. You're not railroading them, but you're also not basically being like, well, because of the fact that you didn't go 50 miles out into the back country, make a right, and look behind under that rock, there is the last clue that you really needed to unravel the mystery. Hopefully you've been like, oh, hey, you found this, you investigated this, you found signs of this, so that your players know that there's something else going on, so that if they choose to, they can look deeper into it, and they can uncover more. And they can figure out what's going on because they want to investigate it, not because you force them into it. You always want to make your players feel like they've uncovered the mystery, that they've figured it out, that you have laid it out before them, and they're the ones who opened the door, looked around there, they checked the ceiling, they put the pieces together. Because that's the point of this. The point of this storytelling is to basically your player, again, as I've talked about in a panel I've written about GMing, basically that you want your players to win, but basically what does winning really mean? Winning is the end result of a lot of build up of you setting the expectations and the goal, so that they feel like winning is what ends up happening. But in any case, at the end of all of this, they've followed all the clues, they've figured it out, and then they're left with a situation at the end where they're like, all right, we've got 3 different factions here, and whoever we pin this crime on, there's going to be consequences to it. If we pin it on this group, a war might break out. If we pin it on this group, genocide might happen. They might go to wipe these things out, because these things are stealing from them, and so they don't care if they're rare or mythical or on the verge of basically are endangered. They want them gone because they're endangering their supplies in a wartime situation. Or if you lie about it, and if you blame this, then you're going to cause you may be blaming an innocent person, or causing basically internal conflict or weakening a side. And so your players have to make that choice, and they give you a lot of interesting, basically the adventure itself, what I'd love to give credit to them for, is they lay out all of those different endings. They don't just say, here is the correct choice. Your players should figure out that these are the people responsible for it, and they should show up. And here's the end result. They're like, okay, you blame these people. Here's what happens. Basically, And if your players want to be involved in that, here's basically the players want to take side in the war that they start. Here's how they could take side in either side of the war they started. If the players want to blame it on this group, here's the effect that it's going to have on this group. Basically, here's they can take either side in dealing with the consequences of that. And so, but in order to reach that point, you have to build up all of that. You need to basically, they give you like clues and things like that. You need to keep track of that, keep track of kind of do careful tracking of where your players are, what your players are up to, um, and basically do a lot of events and things like that. And you may want to use the timeline feature, for example, to set up what the events that actually happen and be like, okay, all right, here is the basically the steal from the Clue movie, but here's what really happened. I basically should spell what happened, right? There we go. And so you may come in here and be like, okay, let's create an event. Let's get them up then. Fieldwoods. And the shield wall. It's not called the shield wall, I just Shieldwoods, that's right. Woods and then Ajic. The three forces. Set up. Encampment. I don't remember his name, so I just do it just really quickly. Okay. Gosh. And then stolen supplies. Records. There. And so then we got all of that. So now I can add all of those in. So associate that event. Give that to 1. Associate that event. So now I put that in the wrong place. I need to edit that here in a bit. Add that. Excuse me. these things happen at the same time. Sort that by index. No, that one should be 3, not 4. Okay, so now I basically, what I've created here is basically a timeline of, okay, here's what really happened. Here's the timing of things, so I can keep track of, okay, basically here's this event, it happened at this time, and I can keep track of, okay, now I've got this straight line of basically exactly what happened, when people showed up, basically what people could know about what, so that the Mump Men came here first, so maybe they basically if you're interacting with them, they're going to have a better overall realization of what's going on in the area than maybe the Aegean, who basically set up their encampments. It happens later. There wasn't one there already, or maybe if there was one already, you have that previously, and so that they know about that. Maybe you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'll set that up so that they may have intentionally, some troops basically may have intentionally framed them, etc., etc. But now that you're using the timeline, helps you keep it straight in your head exactly what happened and when it happened. And so that can be key to keeping things tight, keeping things basically when your players ask about, hey, could this person know about this? You'd be like, okay, let me check my timeline. No, that happened before that, so no, they couldn't know about it, or it happened after. So yes, they basically no, they couldn't know about it because it happened after, because it basically had happened before. All of that can be kept track of to basically help you figure out what order you want things to happen, and basically setting all of this up with basically the events either in the timeline, or basically coming in here and then building out the events, and then for each, basically, for example, if we have the commander is going to players. So let's see, like the commander players with in order to influence them to get for this thoughts further into the incident. So basically I can basically after the meeting with the general here in chapter 2, if I want following the meeting with the general, I want the commander of their approach to players. Now I can I can associate that trigger, and now those are linked with each other, and I can basically make sure they're linked back. So I know which goes which way, and so I can keep track of what order things are going to happen. I can then set things into I could use those same events in my sessions to keep track of what dramatic events I want to have happen during a session. Like, okay, I want them to that to happen, and then I want them to the commander to approach the party. So there's that. So so now I can tick those off as they happen. And again, all of this basically putting it all into one place. Like the module is very good in terms of setting things out in terms of here's everything that's out there, because it's looking at it from a more exploration bent. And so you're going to be doing a lot of hopping around inside the module, but basically by pulling stuff out of the module and putting it into lore link like this, you could do a little bit better, do yourself a favor, and be able to organize things in a way that makes it easier for you to basically, instead of having to flip through a PDF and figure out where that particular piece of information was, basically what chapter it was in, what conversation it was in, etc., etc., you could be like, oh, okay. it is under basically I could just click on the relevant event. I could click on the relevant location. The location could have the event underneath it. So if I go to the location and it's not there, oh, I can see it's under basically that location has all the events that happen there. I can pull out the event that I want from it. Game objects, basically you could use that to keep track of basically it helps you keep track of all of the evidence, where it is. Basically you can keep track of where the evidence is, basically, so you can figure out, oh, okay, this is where the evidence is located. This is where this is where the players can find it. This is where this is where the players can get it. Basically, if you're needing to figure out, okay, I need the players to go in this direction. Let me figure out what I have. What do I have associated with that particular clue? How can I guide the players in that direction in order for them to get that clue? So all of that basically helps you kind of build out this mystery in kind of a tight form so that you can keep things moving at the table. So you're not doing a lot of stop, look. Because when you're dealing with like what they've done here, they've created a really big, vast world with a lot of moving parts and moving people, basically some of which are involved in what you're dealing with and some of which aren't. You're going to want to be able to narrow it down, to be able to focus in on just what you want to focus on in the session, but you don't want to lose that connecting tissue, because that connecting tissue is what helped make this world feel lived in. So you can put it all into lore link and be able to zero in on through sessions and be like, okay, here are the important things that I care about. And when your players stray off of that, or they go wandering off this direction or that direction, you know, okay, they're wandering that direction. Basically, what else is in that direction? What can I use to get them back on track in that direction? Basically, or how do I change what's going on, change my plot so that the direction they've taken is the correct direction, or basically deals with, basically helps them deal with all of that in a way that the players can basically feel like they're working in an actual living world. Not just the pages of a module where if you go too far off to the left or the right, they just encounter blankness. So, basically, as an important side note, be honest with your players. If your players end up in a situation where you have reached the point where your ability to improvise and create stuff on the fly has reached its end, and basically with lore link and tools like that, we hope that basically you can figure these out, and you can basically be able to quickly pull stuff together and pull things out. But occasionally you may reach the point where you're like, guys, basically you may just have to be honest with your players and just be like, hey, just so you guys know, you're going off track here. Basically, this is going to we're going to be a little bit slower, we're going to be a little bit off. Basically, things are going to be a little bit different because you've gone wildly off course. And you're human, your players should respect that. And if you reach the point where you as a GM are just locked and done, don't panic, don't shut down, don't feel bad. Again, you're human, it happens. Be honest with your players and work with them to basically get them back onto track in whatever way you need to deal with it at that point. I've reached the end of my brain power as user this capability to be essence. Yeah. It's basically your players understand. They have basically, again, you're GMing the game, which is you have taken on this responsibility so that your players can play in this world. They have a responsibility to play in this world. Like, for example, the example I always give is in a horror RPG, your players have to play along with you, otherwise the game doesn't work. If you present them a creepy haunted house, and basically like something like a pet runs into it, or basically they hear a mysterious voice beckoning them in from inside, and all your players go, nah, and they walk away, the game's over. Basically nothing happens, they all go home, they sleep tightly, and basically sleep tight. Cool, good session, guys, see you guys next Halloween. The players have to basically be like, oh, okay, yeah, we want to play along with it, so we're going to go into the house. And so when you're working with your players and you reach the point where they've wandered into the blankness off of your notes, off of your ability to improvise and create and move things around so that things basically work in the way that you want, you let them know. You're like, hey guys, okay, here basically let's pause things. This is a game, just so you know, there's nothing in this house. Basically, you've gone the wrong way. You're basically, I could come up with 100 things, and basically 100 things that are basically minor, little silly things in this house. And if I had more brain power, maybe I could coolly link it back to this. And you're like, but Critical Role and basically all those people could do it. They also have writers and a budget and the ability to edit. They can just stop the game and be like, hey, we need to take 5 while the GM resets. They could do that. It's harder for you to do that at your table. Um, so be honest with your players when you've reached that point and work with them. Because they want basically you want your players to be honest with you if they reach the point where they're like, hey, basically this isn't interesting, this isn't working, this isn't how I want my character to develop. You want your players to work with you so that you can both together create this cool world that you've wanted to build. Um, so it is 6:25. So basically, with that kind of conversation, as it were, out of the way, basically, thank you all for watching and listening and discussing. Again, this was Red Sky by Solar Studio. Hey, 20 is back. Awesome. Just in time. This is Red Sky by Solar Studios. This module I was building at is their first module. It's available in their store, as well as the PDFs for the game system itself. And basically you can pick up hardcovers and things like that. They were at conventions and basically into the World of Game Design booth. So check them out. You can go there. You can check them out. Basically, again, it's got a really interesting system. It's got a really interesting world. All of those things are available on the website. And so basically, if any of this sound interested, go check them out there. If LoreLink looks interesting to you and all the things, basically all the things I've talked about here, check us out. Basically, we are a campaign management tool system. We are system agnostic, so we can run this 5e conversion, we can run Pathfinder, we can run Alien, you can have your notes for your Dread game. Or basically some of your other games, basically that you may have been wanting to try, basically you're wanting to try out. Basically, LoreLink can help you get all your notes organized and gathered, so you can give things a try and hopefully avoid that blank page syndrome where your players wander too far off your notes. Basically, this can help you run things at the table. So basically, you can go ahead and check us out at the link that just popped up in chat. Basically, our get started link. The best part is our world tier, which is essentially everything I put on here, basically showed off here today, with the exception of the hotspots on maps, is available in our world tier. The limitation is there's only so many images you can upload, and you can only have 2 campaigns. Storage issues, we're a cloud-based system, storage costs money, so there's no limit to how much we can give away for free. But the base system itself, with the events, the locations, the characters, and linking and timelines and all that stuff, all that is available in the world tier for you to check out. So basically, if that sounds interesting to you, go check us out there. Go ahead and subscribe. You'll be dropped right into LoreLink and be able to check those things out. If you're curious about some of the others, basically about other systems, there are things like that, about how LoreLink would handle something like Pathfinder or Blades in the Dark, or Alien, because we are approaching spooky season, or Fallout, for example, which is a system we'll be planning and running later in the month. You can check out our systems page there, which will list all the different systems that I have poked at, pulled apart, and looked at, and basically put into LoreLink. So you could probably be like, oh, hey, I wanted X. There's a chance it might be in there. You could check us out. You could check that out there, see some of the videos of us either planning games in that system or even possibly playing games in that system as well. If you are interested in what we're doing, you want more of this conversation of us planning stuff out, basically kind of tips and tricks on GMing and dealing with situations, basically follow us right here on this Twitch channel. That will let you know when we go live, whether it's me going live to talk about planning stuff in LoreLink, basically a variety of different systems, or doing actual plays. It can also capture basically when Mike goes live, and he's been doing an incredible series on putting in a long basically, if you're wanting to see what does it look like when you put a single campaign into LoreLink. He's on to session 23, I think he said, of that campaign. So basically he's been running those on Mondays. You can follow us and you'll get notifications when you go live. If what we're doing is really interesting and you want to encourage us, we will gratefully accept subscriptions. Basically, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yeah. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, but that's not what I'm talking about. You can subscribe to the what's called my stream. Incredible. There you go. Basically, you can subscribe to the Twitch account, and you can even do that for free and take monies directly from Amazon and put it to us. Basically, here at Twitch, using them. Basically, if you happen to have Amazon Prime, it comes with basically Amazon Prime Gaming, and that lets you basically take that thing and give it to us, taking $5 directly from Amazon and giving it to us. It's great. Well, it's probably less than $5. There's a bunch of other stuff in between. But it works out. It's taking Jeff Bezos' yacht money and giving it some of it to us. We appreciate that. If you're watching this on YouTube or you want to catch more of it, basically you should check our archives. We have a YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel archives all of our previous streams for the last almost 2 years at this point. So basically all of that is basically available on there. You can check those all out. You can like our videos on there and say, hey, I like this one, or basically, I want more of this stuff. Basically, that's what likes are for. You can also subscribe to us because subscriptions on there are free. They also basically let you give notifications when we have new videos that we upload, in case we upload videos that aren't streams, such as when we do tutorial videos or things like that. All of those videos end up on YouTube. So all of that to say, we also have social media, things like that. If you want to find out more information, good to hear, Wolf Mom. Basically, social media is great for basically if you want to catch up. Basically, we have conversations going on about basically cool tips and other stuff, and basically little fun conversations about GMing and things like that. It also lets you know, oh, hey, they're planning on doing this stream or this stream. Basically, lets you know in advance as opposed to just as soon as we go live, which is what Twitch and YouTube will tell you is when we go live. And if you're like, I don't like social media, just give me an update once a month. Cool, great news, we've got you covered. We have a newsletter. I almost said an Instagram. We do have an Instagram, but that's not what I'm talking about here. We have a newsletter, and that newsletter will basically give you a monthly update on all the cool things we did the last month, the cool things we're doing the next month, updates on our development status, and if we're making appearances in places. Like we just finished up being at Gen Con. I was personally at Anime Magic, giving panels at Anime Magic. And other things like basically, so if you want, basically that's a quick place so you don't have to deal with all that. And as 20 points out, later this month, if you want to see us do actual plays, we are doing an actual play of Fallout this month. We're in September, slightly spooky season, and Fallout is, of course, always a little bit on that spooky edge. So basically, you can check out to see what chaos and disasters our basically the Lore Link players get up to in Fallout. We're playing the second chapter of the Machine Frequency Quick Start Adventure. So, all of that was a lot of words and a lot of talking, but basically all of it to say we have plenty of stuff going on and plenty of ways for you to get involved. So, basically, if anything of that sounds interesting, feel free to follow up on that. Leave us comments. Let us know. Contact us, because we always love hearing from people and getting feedback. And basically, until then, we will basically catch you later. Till then, catch you later. Yeah, that didn't come out right. Till then, have a great time. We'll catch you later. That works.